What's up guys, and welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Origins with me, TheOneIntegral, and today we are going to be covering the bug line from the Alola region, starting with Grubbin, then looking at Charjabug, and finally finishing off with Vikavolt, figuring out, where do they come from, what are they based on, what do their names mean, basically. As always, feel free to suggest some more Pokemon down below, or let me know what you think about the origins of this line, but for now let's get started. So obviously here we're starting with Grubbin. It will likely be number 736 in the National Pokédex. That is assuming that the starters, Yungoos and Pikipek, with all their evolutions, come before it. So as if Yungoos has one evolution and Pikipek has two, which we know is true, and no other Pokemon come before it. Of course, that's just a tentative National Dex number right now, but it's really not too important. Grubbin's Japanese name is Agojimushi, and this is the lava Pokemon, being a pure bug type. Grubbin is 0.4 meters or 1 foot 4 inches tall, or I guess you could say long. We really don't know how measurements work for Pokemon, so that is that. And it weighs 4.4 kilograms or 9.7 pounds, so it's a pretty big grub for a grub. Looking at its model from Generation 7, of course we don't know it's shiny yet, but you can see its regular sort of form is, fairly sort of standard for a bug Pokemon. It's nothing too special. And of course it looks like a bug. Now we know Grubbin evolves into Charjabug, but we don't quite know what level it will be at, whether it will be like level 9 or whether it will be a further evolution similar to some lines we had which evolved maybe level 12, and then obviously Vikavolt comes along later on. First, if we just take a quick look over Grubbin, we can see it's a small insect Pokemon based on a grub, as we said, and obviously we'll look at that further later on, which has a sort of a back half of its body is grey, which is similar to a normal grub, sort of grey-whitey colour, and it has two yellow spots on either side of sort of its back here. Its head is sort of a load of different colours. It's brown, sort of the head bit is, but it also has an orange cap here with this yellow sort of rim, and obviously these two large mandibles coming out the front of its face, which are yellow with orange tips. Then we also have large black eyes for Grubbin here, on either side of its face, and you can just about see its mouth between its mandibles, which is a sideways mouth, which is a trait we'll see, continue along this whole evolution line, which is, it's a funky mouth basically. So what do we know about Grubbin, what it does in the wild? Well, it uses its jaw to battle as well as to dig through the ground. And we also hear that it loves electricity, which is obviously a sort of a hint, a link to its later evolution line's typing. It can often be found near power plants for this reason, just I guess because it likes electricity, who knows. But it can also, have some sort of dexterity going through the forest. It can use sticky threads that it produces to swing across tree branches to sort of, move around a bit more easily, I guess. So as I've mentioned already, Grubbin is based on a grub. I mean, it's in the name, but more specifically it is based on a stag beetle larva, and obviously this is for reasons we'll see later on in the video when we look at Vikavolt. So the naming for Grubbin. Its Japanese name Agojimushi is a combination of Ago meaning jaw and Jimushi meaning grub, so basically it is literally jaw grub. Yeah, nothing too amazing there. And then Grubbin is a combination of grub as well as grubbing. Now grubbing meaning to sort of scavenge or dig for things, so if you were on your hands and knees looking around in the dirt, you're technically grubbing there. And obviously I guess it could be a sort of small link to grubbing, like as in eating some grub, but we really don't know, that's grub, and grubbing is the best sense because it's based on a grub, and we're told it digs around in the ground with its jaws. Now in French its name is Lavabule, and this is a combination of lave, which is French for lava, and mandibule, which is French for mandible. So basically, in French it is mandible lava, similar sort of thing there, so very literal basically names for grub, which I'm not complaining about, of course. So if we then look at something else before we move on to look at Charjabug, let's look at how big Grubbin is. As I mentioned, 0.4 meters or 1 foot 4 inches. I'm going by sort of the length of this rather than the height, just because I feel like that's the best way to measure a Grubbin rather. And if that was the case, it's about this big here. Of course, if it was via height alone, it would be a bit bigger, but it's a pretty big grub, to be fair. I mean, grubs, as you saw earlier, can grow pretty big in real life, about the size of your hand. Grubbin would be about the size of your forearm. Not something you want to mess with there, really. So that is it for Grubbin. If we then move on to look at its evolution, we can see Charjabug. It's likely going to be number 737 in the National Pokédex, and its Japanese name is Denjimushi rather than Agojimushi. It is the battery Pokemon and is a bug electric type, being 0.5 meters or 1 foot 8 inches tall, or possibly long again, and weighing 10.5 kilograms or 23.1 pounds, so it's a pretty big battery. If we take a quick look at its models from Generation 7, obviously we don't know the shiny yet, but you can see here, it's basically a green block. There's nothing too extra special about it, it's a green block. As we know, Charjabug evolves into Vikavolt at some level. We don't exactly know when. It could be level 12 like, the early bug Pokemon, or it could be later on, similar to Scolipede, because Vikavolt does seem quite powerful indeed. So, let's just take a quick look over Charjabug and see what we can find out about it. It is a cuboid Pokemon, obviously, with a dark green body, all over, but it also has these sort of stubs on its underside, to either side, which we can assume are functioning as some sort of legs, or just little stubs it can move to drag itself along, and these are brown, as well as this also has these two green circles, sort of moving on from Grubbin's two yellow circles on its back. We have these two green circles. They're not any different to its back colour, but they're just there on this sort of the back two sections, with the front section being its head, and on the front of this head we have two yellow spikes, sort of moving on from Grubbin's large mandibles. Charjabug actually has rectangular eyes, as you can see here, and they're blue, but they have green lights that can shine inside behind it, very much like a TV almost. And it has this nice, huge, rectangular grey mouth with sideways jaws, as I mentioned just now, carrying along this whole evolution line. So what does Charjabug do? Well, it's a cocoon Pokemon, so it stays motionless most of the time, waiting to evolve basically, just eating and waiting to evolve. And it often does this half buried in the ground, so I guess just to, conserve energy. And it can also store this energy in its body in the form of electricity, and it can then provide it to other Pokemon. We can assume people as well to, power up their moves, or we can assume I think one of their little facts is that Charjabug can store enough electricity to power like a small town or something, so it could be very useful in real life. So what is Charjabug based on? Well, it's the battery Pokemon, so it's based on a battery. Who knows? Who knew rather? We have this cuboid, rectangular battery, something too special there. But it also does take inspiration from cocoons, and lava and stuff like that, since obviously it makes a lot of sense. It's the cocoon stage, and it does look like a cocoon in some aspects, especially its behaviour staying motionless until it evolves. So the names, we have Denjimushi. As you know, Jimushi is grub, and Denchi is Japanese for battery. So basically we have battery grub almost, basically. It's a close enough thing. Charjabug in English is a combination of charge or charger, it's saying, it's a charger pack basically, it's a battery pack, or to say it's going to charge it, and obviously bug, so Charjabug, nothing too special there. And in German, its name is Akkup, which is a combination of Akku meaning battery and Pupu meaning pupa, so basically battery pupa, nothing too special there again, but good names nonetheless. Before we move on to the final Pokemon for today, let's have a quick look at Charjabug's size. As I mentioned, 0.5 meters or 1 foot 8 inches. I'm going to assume this is the length, but it's still pretty huge. So it's a half meter long battery basically. So I'm not going to mess with it, but it is pretty big. Much bigger than the batteries you're used to. So Charjabug's finished. Let's move on to the final Pokemon for today and the final evolution of this line, Vikavolt. Number 738 in the National Pokédex, very likely, and its Japanese name is Quaganon. It is the stag beetle Pokemon, and like Charjabug, a bug electric type. It's now grown to be 1.5 meters or 4 foot 11 inches, sort of tall, but I'm going to assume this is the wingspan, the length of the wingspan for Vikavolt, and it weighs 45 kilograms or 99.2 pounds. Again, we don't know the shiny for Vikavolt quite yet. We can see its regular form is pretty bulky and pretty heavy, I suppose, for a bug type at least, and it looks pretty cool, as we'll look at in a second. So, what, as I mentioned just literally then, what does Vikavolt look like? Well, it's blue, and it's insectoid. It's an insect in appearance, with this dark blue body, and also has a black back, and as well as these 4 legs as well. So it's blue, it's a black body covered in blue plating, basically. It has these 2 large mandibles on its front of its face again, similar to Grubbin, and these actually have spikes on the inside, as well as these large spikes coming out the side of its head. As well as this, it has 2 wide wings on its back to allow it to fly, basically, and these are tucked underneath these blue plates it can then bring up, along with its 4 legs at the bottom there, with what looks to be 2 claws on each foot. It has an orange face, again with a sideways mouth, very similar to its pre-evolutions, and it has triangular yellow eyes, again building on the idea that it is an electric type. What do we know about Vikavolt? Well, we know it can fire a beam of electricity from its mouth, or from its jaws, or from its whatever you want to call them, and yes, this is powered by its large jaws, so we can assume the jaws, the large mandibles on its face, have some sort of electric power even if they aren't the source of the electricity. And Vikavolt is also adaptive at acrobatic flight, hence its ability to levitate, allowing it to sort of do little tricks including tail spins and sharp turns, and it can use this experience to fly at high speeds even through a forest, ducking and diving up and down the branches. Vikavolt also has a little special ability that it can hold a Charjabug in its legs while it flies, and it can use this as an extra battery. As we mentioned just now, Charjabug can lend its stored electricity to other Pokemon to power up their moves, and it can use Vikavolt can use this Charjabug to power itself up. But it does release the Charjabug during battle to increase mobility, because obviously carrying around a nice fat Charjabug who weighs 10.5 kilograms, you don't want to do that a lot. So it can release it to increase its mobility while after gaining that extra electricity from it. So since Vikavolt is a stag beetle Pokemon, it's based on a stag beetle. There's nothing too much extra to say there at all. It's fairly obvious. It's almost identical, apart from the fact that Vikavolt can shoot electricity. But maybe there's a stag beetle that can do that. Name-wise, the Japanese name is Kuwaganon, which is a combination of Kuwagatamushi, which is Japanese for stag beetle, and cannon. We've heard it can shoot an electric beam from its mouth. Cannon is very similar to that. Now Vikavolt is a bit different. Obviously it includes Volt, to do with electricity, but their Vika is a bit of a more long link, and Vika is actually Finnish for bug, so it's possible that could be where it comes from, but we know Volt is the main sort of basis for that. The German name for Vikavolt, which is Donarion, is a combination of Donner, which means thunder, and ion. Ion being, positively or negatively charged particle. So a particle that has a charge, very linking in again to electricity. So before we finish up today, let's just take a quick look at Vikavolt's size. I mentioned it was 1.5 meters or 4 foot 11 inches, and I'm going to assume this is the wingspan for the Pokemon, not its height or its length or anything like that, because flying Pokemon are usually measured by their wingspan, just like serpentine Pokemon are usually measured by their length, not their sort of standing height. You can see here, it means Vikavolt is still pretty big. Sized up against Ash, it makes a lot of sense. It looks very similar to the size we saw in the trailer for it, so it makes sense there. But that is going to be it for the end for this episode of Pokemon Origins. If you guys enjoyed the episode, don't forget to hit the like button down below and let me know what other Pokemon, particularly from Alola, you would like to see covered in future installments. But for now, this is going to be it for me for today. I'll be seeing you next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, my friends.